So, you want to make eyelashes like these? Well, you're in luck, because I have spent longer than I'd like to admit trying to figure it out. And now that I finally have, I'm going to show you how I did it, so that hopefully you will have an easier time. As a quick disclaimer, a lot of the geometry notes I use have modifications that were made by another YouTuber called Smay, so I'm going to leave his link in the description. I'd recommend you check him out, because he makes really good tutorials on the Blender hair system using geometry notes. So, with that all out of the way, let's get started. Now, you might be asking, what is a growth mesh? And essentially, it's just a separate mesh that we attach our hair system to. The reason we do that is because it gives us greater control over the UVs and the placement of the eyelashes without having to worry about affecting the actual mesh where the eyes are. The best way to create this growth mesh is to take your pre-existing eye mesh, preferably retopologized, go into edit mode, and select the two face loops that go around the area where your eyelashes normally grow out from. Hold down Shift and press D to duplicate, and then press P to separate by selection. Now you can leave it at that, or do like I did, which is to add a subdivision modifier and then shrink wrap it to the higher resolution version of your eye model. Once you're done with all that, you can add UV seams in the corners and then UV unwrap it. I'd recommend using the free add-on UV squares to make your UVs beautiful and straight like this. When it comes to using Blender's geometry node hair system, placing good guide curves can be very beneficial. But before that, we need to create a new hair system, and to do that, we select our growth mesh, hold down Shift, press A, go to the Curves tab, and create empty hair. With your curves selected, you can go into the Sculpt mode and select the Add brush. I recommend using projected falloff and having the length at around 0.03 meters. After all that, you can start placing down hairs with semi-even spacing around the upper eyelid as well as the lower eyelid. Then you can comb the hairs into eyelash shapes using the comb brush. Finally, you want to vary the length of the hairs by using the Grow, Shrink brush or the Snake Hook brush. If you want to change the shape of the hair strands, go to the Modifiers tab and add a modifier called Set Hair Curve Profile. There you can play around with the settings until you find something you like. If you've done everything correctly so far, you should have something that looks like this. Before we can get to the geonodes, we need to do two things. The first is to go to the Texture Paint tab and create a new texture, and then draw white lines down the center of your UV square. You'll see why in a moment. To make things easier, I recommend changing the stroke method to a line. In the end, it should look something like this. After that, go back to your layout view, go to the Data tab, and create a new vertex group for your growth mesh. And then you are ready to open up the geonodes and make these eyelashes come to life. Once you have created your geometry nodes modifier, you're met with this screen. The first thing you need to do is to create a new group input, call it vertex group, and make it a float. Then in the side panel, write in the name of your vertex group. After that, you want to add a Set Hair Curve Profile node and a Interpolate Hair Curves node. Then you want to connect the surface to the surface. It should automatically be the growth mesh, the surface UV map to the surface UV map, and the vertex group to the density mask. With the vertex group, you can assign different weights to each vertex, which determines the density of hairs in that area. And then finally, you want to add the mask texture that you made earlier. Now if you're wondering why you still don't see any hairs, That's simply because you need to increase the density from 10 to about 200,000. Why it needs to be so high, I'm not so sure, but there is some reason for it. Now comes the time where we use one of those modified nodes, so if you want more details on that, watch the video in the description. But essentially you want to create a setup that looks like this. This setup basically just takes our interpolated hairs and randomizes them a bit, to make them a lot more realistic. But then the last step is to add the clump node. For the clump node, don't forget to connect the guide index, and for that realism, change the tip spread to 0.004. And there you have it. Pretty good, if I do say so myself. Of course, you can play around with the settings to get another result, but this is at least how I did it, and I hope that helps you. If you've made it this far, thank you very much. Please consider giving this video a like, or even subscribing. But in all cases, I hope to see you again. Bye bye.